Okay, so basically I want to show you guys today. Here we go. Alright, so first I just want to show you today, basically I have what it's called an access point TP-Link, and it took me a while because I'm trying to figure out how to get this thing set up without any interruption, but somehow it still does. Anyway, so this is the you got different old kind of models. This is basically one of them. Is called 5400. I believe this is the mid-range, but it's not that bad. It's about 170 bucks, maybe 150 bucks. And what it contains is it's a ceiling access point like this one. It's right here. And I showed you earlier that you could connect it through a PoE switch or PoE adapter. All right, PoE adapter. So I already disconnected. And they do give you only the AC power. And if you really want to connect it to the ceiling, it is better to have PoE adapter and through a PoE switch. Okay, so the way to do it, obviously, you just connect it through the PoE, and then you flip it, and you just wait. And then we're gonna see the blue light start to flicker. And once it's being flickering, I had this thing set up as a DHCP, and it picked up that address, as you can see, 192.168.239. But I went there and I changed it to a static. So I believe the static. And another thing is, if you're not really sure how to do this thing, best recommended is to download the Amada software on your app. I mean, on the your phone, something like this. Let me see if I have it here shown. I believe it is, and it's right there, down there, Amada. Or you could just point your camera to that software that it's provided here inside the box. Anyway, so right now, if you're not sure about how to get to the IP address, there's another method you can do, what it's called download the advanced IP scanner. And this is something like that. After it's being downloaded, I'm just gonna run the scan, and as you can see, it's gonna go through all these. This is really a great idea if you do not know how to do this. Okay, so this is it. So as you can see, I have all these IP addresses that are popping up. Basically, it tells me the status, the name, the IP address, the manufacturer, the MAC address, and the comments. And what basically means is the status, as you can see, it's blue. Blue meaning is active, is up and running. And there's a small arrow on the side of each. That means it tells you if you could be able to connect through it as a URL, or either sometimes as an IP address. Sometimes it may not let you an IP address. For instance, this one, I'll show you what I mean. Mine is, I changed it to 197. So if in case you're not sure where to find it, you can always type it in the search, or you could just go simply by the name, the manufacturer, or the IP addresses. I'd rather buy the IP addresses. Mine is, I already named it 197. So let me see, it is gonna be here. So 197, and there it is right here, 197. You see it, 197, because I made. And then you click on this small arrow, you see it right here, and here it's telling me you have to log in as an HTTP login. In other words, not by the IP address. You can make it. So I'm gonna double click it, and here, when I configured it on the phone, you put in, obviously you put in your email address and your password, and then they send you an activation to your email, and you activate it, and then you go back again and you type in the SSID and the password and all that information, and that's where we stand right now. So right now, I think it's the user ID is a little bit case sensitive. Most nodes they're not, but in this case it turned out to be. So I put admin. You see it popped up already. Admin, and the password, obviously I'm not gonna tell you. And here we go. Now here with the status, it tells you the device name, device model, and the build, hardware, MAC address, IP address. You remember I told you 197 was 239, and the speed is 100 megabyte. Now this is pretty interesting. The LAN port is 100, right? I believe this one, let me see, it's up to 2.5 on this one. Let me just make sure. TP link, blah blah blah, and 5 gig and hardware. Okay, yeah, it's one all the way on the bottom right here. It tells me the speed or how much. For instance, let's say you got yourself a PoE switch 1 gig. It will be able to have up to 1 gig, or your modem. So keep that in mind. Let's just say you have an older modem, and the older modem, let's say only up to 100, and it's gonna work up to 100. But if you have 1 gig, this thing may not function unless you plug it in into a node or a device that is capable giving out 100 or 1 gig. So in this case, that's why sometimes people like saying, how come I'm only getting 100 megabyte? You get 100 megabyte, even though this one, it says it could go up to 2.5. And the reason you're not getting 2.5 is because your PoE switch, it may only be that port 1 gig or 100. So you could get 100 megabyte, or you could get 100 gig. It's not gonna produce or give out output that speed. Just keep that in mind, or depending also on your ISP internet. So there's a couple of factors here. Okay, so you could get a faster access point, but your PoE switch cannot handle it. It's not gonna work. All right, so here, status, device, wireless client. Okay, let's see the difference. Now if you click on wireless, under radio settings, you got the 2.4, you got the 5 gig. So it's enabled, and it tells me that I want all mix B, G, A, N, and an AX. It tells me the speed 573 megabyte per second. That's not bad. And there is the power 25. And this is the radio. So here you could click 2.4, it's on channel 1, and it tells you the megahertz. On the 5 gig, it usually starts out with 36. Here, if you go to the radio traffic, it tells me the 2.4 and the 5 gig. So right now, I'm already connected to a 5 gig. The reason how I could tell, there's no traffic, there's no activities here. The difference between 2.4 and 5 gig, obviously the 5 gig is much faster, but shorter distance. The 2.4, it's a little slower, but longer distance. So when I say slower, it doesn't mean you're really gonna be that affected, but it's really good if you really wanna have a wider range to connect to. The 5 gigahertz is good to select it or enable it, or just have only 5 gig if you happen to be just in the area of home where you know you're only gonna be able to connect without any dropping. For instance, you could select both of them. Either, in other words, let the access point select the best, either 5 gig or 2.4. If you having connection issues, let's say it keeps dropping like on and off and on, it could be many factors, but one of them you could just say get rid of the 5 gig and just make it only 2.4, or 5 gig and get rid of the 2.4. And there's a LAN traffic. LAN traffic means how it's connected through the wired. Remember, wired. See, that's LAN. Obviously it's connected. Okay, now let's go into the client. Now the client is interesting. So I named my SSID. Now to explain it quicker for you to understand this, SSID meaning it is the name of the device that you called it. So let's just say you're home or in your school or business or work, and when someone search on their phone to see if there's any Wi-Fi, they have to select obviously what's broadcasting. Sometimes they could have it hidden, and you have to type in the hidden SSID. So keep that in mind. Just because it's not showing, it doesn't mean it's not working. Some people, they hide it, they don't want people to know it, but doesn't mean that they cannot connect to it. If you know the exact name and the password, you will connect to it despite that is not shown on your phone app. All right, so as I said earlier, see how it shows the MAC address? MAC address means the MAC address of this device. And the reason is sometimes they want people to connect via MAC address to block all others who are not associated with the company or the employees or whatever, and they want less people to connect, especially hacking into it. So the IP address is 192.168. This is the IP address of that has been given to me. Unknown. Since it's new, it may not give me the exact. Sometimes it may say Ross iPhone or Deb or Jenna or whoever. Here in the action, you can always block certain people they connect. And here, rate. If you click on a rate, you could enable the rate. If you bring your mouse over here, it means how much download you want. For instance, you may want them just to have less to download, so they may not be able to check out, let's say, YouTube. There could be a lot on YouTube. If you don't care, then just leave it open. And there it shows me the speed and the RSSI. This is very interesting. Keep that in mind. This one right here, the lesser the better. For example, -3.4, it means is less susceptible to that there is no connection or there is interference whatsoever. So the higher is the worse. I think it's anything over 70, it's really bad. You're gonna have issues. But anything under, you should be good. And there it goes. Block client list. Obviously, once you name them like that, you can always block certain people after you get to know them. Here's a guest. I already enabled the guest, but I'm going to show you how to do that. First, let's go to the wireless. And in the wireless here, just to give you some idea, see what it shows here, guest network. Security, it means yes, you need the WPA, you need to know the password. The SSID, you remember I told you earlier, you could have it enabled or disabled. When someone says enabled, it means they could see the SSID. If you turn it off, you're not going to be able to see it. The VLAN, you don't have to worry about right now. That's a different story, which I'm not going to explain that till next session, maybe. Let's see what else. Okay, so the wireless right here. Okay, the 2.4, obviously, and the 5 gig. They both enabled, see? You could enable them. You could enable or you could disable them. So I left them both. The portal, and there we go. I named it Home Dell, remember? Authentication type, and obviously you could put local password or radio server, which we're not going to do that because that's something else. VLAN, we're not going to do anything about that. The MAC filtering, if you want to do that, remember, it means I have to know, or after your nodes are being established, I could copy them into a spreadsheet, and after I know them, then I could be able to enable the filtering, and then I could deny or only by what? Allowing certain devices that could connect to this thing. So if you do not know how to do any of that stuff, don't get yourself confused or make it any harder. You could create a group. I mean, but I'm gonna just turn it off for now. Scheduler, if you enable it, and in this case, when you could turn off the SSID certain time if you want, or associated with the access point with this one, see? But I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna keep it on all the time. Band steering, okay. Band steering is pretty interesting, and if you read it here carefully under the note, to run the band steering function as an SSID, please create the SSID on both of the 2 gig and the 5 gig and make sure they have the same name and security. So you could have, let's say, 2 access point or in this one, but you want to make sure it has the same name and the same password. This way it could connect without any interference or any drops. In other words, you would want to call the 5 gigahertz Home Dell, and the 2.4 also Home Dell, and with the same password. You know, in other words, you can't have band steering. Let's say we named the 5 gig. If you go back here, let's say you call the 2.4, let's say Home Dell, and the 5 gig you called it Wayne. You cannot have band steering because they have 2 different names. You have to have the same SSID with the same password. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, it's not gonna work. And where was I? Right here. That's the band steering. So if you click on enabled, right, and you could click balance or only 5 gig. Balance means it could either pick the 2.4 or the 5 gig. If you only care about just nothing but 5 gig, you can always select 5 gig. I'm gonna disable it right now, I don't need it. This is a different thing which I'm not gonna go through. This thing, rogue access point detection. This one probably most likely it will look for any access point in the vicinity or trusted ones if you want to add them. Management, you remember I told you earlier, if you click dynamic, which you don't want to do that, but if you click dynamic, you basically saying you want your DHCP, dynamic host communication or configuration protocol, to give the IP address automatically. I'd rather have it static. Why? Because you want to connect to this thing and you know it. That's how I like to do it. So if you click status, that's how I named it, 197. Remember, 192, 168, 197, blah blah blah, and all that stuff. And just keep in mind, if your router or your network may be a little bit slightly different, you want to be careful. You want to always go by what the gateway is. So your gateway may be 192.168.0.1. You want to make sure you put 192.168.0 and you name it whatever static IP address, and you want to make sure it's available, this port, okay, this IP address. Otherwise, it's going to be a conflict. Keep that in mind. All right. System, obviously, if you want to change your user ID and a password, then you make all that change. The firmware, obviously, again, you have to go into the TP-Link to see if there is any new firmware. Backup and restore. Let's say if you want to back up, you could back up the configuration, and if you have a new one, you can always click restore, and it takes you to the. And in here, you could reboot the system, and you have to be careful if you want to reset the system. Reset, it means whatever configuration, whatever you had, any user ID, password, SSID, or blockage, whatever, you want to change it back to manufacturer. And if you do that, you're not going to be able to have access to this access point because everything back to default, which means you have to go back the same way as I said earlier, and you may want to find that access point, or you find it through your phone. So you don't want to do that unless there is an issue or a problem. Time settings, I did obviously selected my time zone. I'm in the New York vicinity area, so there's a date, the time, blah blah blah. Enable daylight savings, I just put that, USA. And controller settings. Controller settings, you don't need to do that. The reason is because this is a standalone access point. The controller is basically, it's like a device that controls many access points, and it in a different way as when you move around or in a store or in a business, the controller, it will be like responsible to connect you to the best device without interruption. It's a little bit different to set it up and configure it, and a little bit more expensive, but at this moment you don't have to worry about that. That's why it says disabled. See it? There is a cloud-based controller management, but with that is, I believe you may have to pay some money, blah blah blah, and all that kind of stuff, which we don't need. I don't really need it. All right, that's about it. I hope that helps you guys out. If there's anything else, let me know. So again, if you made everything changes, you wanna go into system, reboot. Remember, reboot, not reset, reboot. So I'm gonna reboot the system because I made a couple of changes, and underneath it's showing me the status, which is gonna take me a little bit longer. I hope that helps you guys out. If there's any questions, comments, let me know. Remember, this is the box that looks like that. TP-Link, Omada. It's the software, and you could do mesh technology, seamless roaming, mesh technology, 160 megahertz channels, which means many different. Centralized management, which means cloud, if you want to have the controller or a cloud, and it tells me 4804 megabyte per second to 574 megabyte per second. And inside this box, I think I showed you earlier, it's really nothing much to it. This is where the access point in this thing, and I have this thing here that tells me how to put it in a ceiling. Okay, it's really simple. And there, this is the one that I was telling you earlier. the Omada right here, or you could just type it in I'm sorry, Amada, wait, I'm sorry, OMADA, Omada. All right, and there's a hardware installation. I mean, you could just type it in and look it up on the internet. All right, so that's it. Oh, they did provide, it did not come with a PoE adapter. Remember, they only gave you an AC adapter. AC, see it? Obviously, if you want to put it in the ceiling, 90% nobody uses these things. All right, I prefer to use a PoE, and because up in the ceiling, you want to have less wires and no obstruction whatsoever. All right. Any questions, comment, please don't forget to subscribe, give a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. I mean, comments will be appreciated. Subscribe. I also have videos on other things, but you have to be a prepaid subscriber. It's really cheap, very affordable, $2.99, or a helping hand, maybe $4.99. I would appreciate that. Thank you guys, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope that helps you guys out. All right. The only thing I think I did not show you on the bottom of this thing, did I? Yes, right there. And it only has one small light blue. All right. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.